Okay guys, so for anyone who's ever been on AliExpress in search of their first budget bait finesse reel, I'm going to assume that your choices after doing your research have probably been narrowed down to 3 reels. Now the first reel is probably going to be the very popular SHIMANO XF50, a reel that BCSG Fishing, I credit him with putting this reel on the map. And I bought one because of his review, and I made my own review. And this is a very safe bet as being your first bait finesse reel. It's one of these rare reels that fish a lot better than its price point. The performance is a lot higher than what you would pay for it. But it does have some limitations to it. Now the second reel is probably going to be this reel here, and you probably saw this reel and saw that spool being so shallow and so light and thought, wow, this is going to be a great bait finesse reel. But if you've seen my videos on this reel, I think this reel is a huge disappointment. On paper the specifications are top notch, but out on the water, in my opinion, it falls on its face due to the really ill-developed, poorly developed magnetic brake system. That's the only thing that's holding this reel back, as well as a couple of issues which I'll go over in a later video. Okay, so the third reel is a reel that probably looks the best out of these 3, and it's a reel that a lot of people have been wanting me to get and test. And it is this reel right here. I just got it today. Now a subscriber really must have wanted me to do a test, because he put his money where his mouth was and went out and bought this reel and had it sent to me all the way from China. So I obliged him. Now when I'm done with this reel, I am going to ship it to him. But this is going to be the Potm from Seaknight. So let me unbox this. Okay, there we go. Now the box was kind of bent up, but luckily the reel box itself looks to be in great shape. So Seaknight Potm, kind of a weird name for a reel, but let's see what you get. Give you guys a better view. Okay, now this came in upside down, but no big deal. So I was very close to pulling the trigger on this reel several times, but I'll tell you why I didn't here in a moment. But this is pretty much all you get, the instructions and the box. So no big deal. Now just to let you know right now, I think these are about $58 on AliExpress, roughly the same price as the other 2 reels. Okay, this might be the first American review of this reel. There's a lot of reviews from Russia, and let's take a look at this. So I'm gonna let you guys take a few moments to soak in the details of this reel. See that really shallow spool. It's got a lot of chrome accents. Here's what the bottom looks like. So yeah, Seaknight Potm. And I'm gonna study this reel, look for any kind of characteristics, quirks, etc. And then we'll get back into it. Okay guys, so I've taken a few minutes to examine this reel, and it really didn't take too long, because as you can see, this is pretty much sharing the same frame and body as the PISCIFUN Phantom. And I think we can all agree that this is visually a very good looking reel. It's got this nice deep shiny black paint, but it's got just enough chrome accents to make it look a lot more expensive than it really is. But before we get to that portion of this review, let's talk about the specifications. Now, this is supposed to feature what they call a C60 carbon fiber frame, and I think that applies to the side plates as well, but online it did not specify. Now, this has 11 plus 1 bearings, so a total of 12 bearings, and they said that the spool bearings are these higher spec Japanese spool bearings. So 2 of the bearings are Japanese, while the rest of them are stainless steel, but it's got a high bearing count. Now, Seaknight said this is freshwater only. Now, this has a relatively high 7.6 to 1 gear ratio. If I can just show you guys here, if that'll focus. And they say it has carbon fiber drag washers that are rated to 5 kilograms, so that equates to about 11 pounds. And it's got a total of 23 settings on the external magnetic brake. As you can see, the brake dial is numbered, and they're pretty easy to see, at least in here. Comes in right and left hand. And now, they didn't specify this on the website, but this appears to be a 90 millimeter length carbon fiber swept handle. So I measured it up against another reel that I know has a 90 millimeter handle, the EXSENCE DC, and they look to be the same. And I've also measured it up against the CURADO K that I have, and it's exactly the same length as well. So yeah, this is a much better looking reel in my opinion than the other two, the STEEZ and the XF50, even though those are pretty decent looking reels in their own right. But let's take in the details. Now, the drag star is graphite. It is swept, and of course it does click. They're kind of soft clicks, and when it came to me, the drag star was tightened down all the way to the max, and I actually found it hard to disengage and loosen it up, but once I did, it's pretty easy. Now, the spool tension here, as you can see, it's got these nice chrome silver rings, and it does not click. It's kind of hard to turn too, but that means it won't move. As you can see, the thumb bar is chrome, but they left this rubber piece black. That looks really, really high end to me. It's got a nice, decent feel to it. Got a good grip. There's no mush, no kind of slop or play. It just engages when you immediately start pressing down on it. You can see the chrome around the brake dial. Just kind of breaks up the monotony of the shiny black. Front piece is chrome. Logos and badges everywhere. Seaknight, Potm. Now, the knobs are EVA, and they're just the right size. And the EVA doesn't feel cheap. You can tell cheap EVA because I guess it's not as dense and it feels really rough. But this feels not super high end, but maybe mid-grade EVA. As you can see, more detailed knob end caps. Mind you, of Abu Garcia Revos. And you can see this spool here. It's a really good looking spool. It reminds me a lot of my Abu Garcia Revo LTX first generation. It's got a whole bunch of ports, and as you can see, it is super shallow. So this is the main reason why a lot of people will look at this as a bait finesse reel. So with that being said, we're gonna get to the nitty gritty, and we're gonna get some weights and measurements. Okay, so the scale's out, and I'm gonna get some weights on this thing versus its rivals. So this thing is supposed to only weigh 155 grams. So I think that's supposed to be like 5.5 ounces. So let's check it out. Okay, so it's right under 5.5 ounces. So to give you an idea of the significance of that, this weighs less than my $300+ Core 50 that's made out of magnesium. And you can tell it's pretty light despite being a relatively big reel. Okay, so let's weigh the Seaknight XF50. That is 6.8 ounces. By today's standards, that is still pretty light, but significantly heavier than the Seaknight. And of course, the STEEZ is weighing in at 6.4 ounces. So about an ounce more than the Seaknight Potm. And you can feel the difference, even though the Seaknight is significantly bigger, as you can see, than the STEEZ. And I believe it's bigger than even the XF50 as well. Okay, so let's get these spools out. Okay guys, so I got the spools out and let's take a look at this Seaknight spool. It is heavily ported. It's got a ton of porting on it. It's got this really classy looking silver stripe going down the middle, as well as the edges of the spool are anodized silver. As you can see, it's got a bearing, and the center section is really ported as well. And it feels pretty light. Now, one thing to say that this is a really tall spool. It's 35 millimeters, and that's really tall by bait finesse standards. And here's the XF50 spool. It's kind of pedestrian. Of course, it's got a bearing, and you can see it's a lot deeper than the Seaknight spool as far as line capacity. And this is a smaller spool as well, 34 millimeters. And here's the REVO spool. Now this is a good looking spool, and in my hand it feels lighter than the Seaknight spool. And I think the REVO spool is either 35 or 34, probably 35. But I tried to put the Seaknight spool into the REVO frame and it wouldn't fit, so it may be only 34. But yeah, the depth of the two are very similar. They're both very, very shallow. And I think the REVO may be just a tad bit more shallow than the Seaknight. Okay, so time to get to the nitty gritty and give these spools away. Now the first thing I'm going to do is weigh the Seaknight spool. Now Seaknight states that this spool is supposed to weigh 13 grams with the bearing. And that is right on the money, 12.99 grams. So that's not bad. And then the XF50 weighs virtually the same, 12.94, so that's pretty light. I thought that the XF50 spool weighed more than that, but that's just how long it's been since I've weighed this spool. So 13 grams for both the Seaknight and the XF50 and the REVO STEEZ. You're looking at 10.2 grams. So much, much lighter than the others. Of course, all three of these have bearings on the spool shafts. So to give Chris a better, more detailed review, I'm going to remove the bearings on all three and give them away. So I pulled out my spool bearing removal tool, and just so I don't do any kind of cosmetic damage to this spool or the other spools, I put a triple layer of masking tape on the edges so I don't get any kind of damage like I did with the DAIWA air spools that are supposedly supposed to be made of a much stronger metal. So let's take these bearings off. So spool bearings removed from all 3 spools. And let's see what the rotational mass is of these spools without the bearings. 11.8 grams for the Seaknight Potm. I thought it would be lighter than that. I thought it'd be closer to 11.5 grams. So that must be a lighter bearing than average. So 11.8 for the Seaknight Potm. The XF50 is 11.3. So this is half a gram lighter when you take the spool bearing off. It's kind of strange. I'm gonna weigh those spool bearings. And then of course the STEEZ with its super ultralight 8.5 gram spool. Okay, so I've kept the bearings separate so I don't mix them up, but the spool bearing on the Seaknight is only 1.1 grams, while the STEEZ looks like it may have a bigger bearing, and it's almost 1.5 grams. So apparently there are different weights for spool bearings, and this is even heavier for the STEEZ. So yeah, the Seaknight has the heaviest spool here by far, even heavier than the XF50 by half a gram. And that kind of explains a lot to me. Let me explain a little bit later. Now, I will tell you that the Seaknight does have an aluminum shaft, like the STEEZ, while I believe the XF50 has a stainless steel spool shaft. So while we have these spools out, let's go ahead and talk about these brakes. Now, the Potm features the same Korean style Magtrax braking, but as you can see, this has 1 to 8 total magnets, 4 on each side. And some of these magnets have some material on it. I don't know if that's to signify if they're positive or negative, but there's no extra places to put extra magnets that I can see. Now, the XF50 has a 6 magnet system that is very, very effective, very, very strong. And I think this allows it to be able to perform better than its price point and what its spool may suggest. And let's talk about this piece of shit right here, the STEEZ. You have the option to put 11 magnets, and even with these 11 magnets, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These brakes are still shit. They are super weak. You really have to crank up the brakes all the way to the maximum and turn the spool tension up super tight to even make this somewhat fishable. Even then, you are going to be dealing with a lot of overruns and headaches. So the STEEZ definitely has the worst brakes here. And so far the Tsurunoya has the best brakes, but we don't know about the Seaknight yet. So hopefully this will be more XF50 and less STEEZ like. But we've already seen that the spool is the heaviest here. So the Seaknight Potm, a reel that seemingly gives you a lot of specifications for the money, and on paper it should be a top performing finesse reel. So the question is, why haven't I purchased one for myself? Why did it take a subscriber to spend his own money and have one sent to me all the way from China for me to review? And the question is answered pretty easily. Now, first of all, we have to talk about myself. Now, a lot of people may see all the reels that I review and think that I'm a very impulsive buyer, and actually that's not true. I actually do research, as much research as I can on products before I make my purchase and spend my hard-earned money. So when doing the research on this reel, there was quite a few videos, but the one video that swayed my decision not to buy it was from BCSG Fishing. I mentioned him before. He's one of the very few YouTube reviewers that I actually trust. He's not a shield with affiliations or agendas. Now, especially when it comes to bait finesse, he's a bait finesse goober like me. He's got a lot of experience with a lot of different bait finesse tackle. So when he took this out and shot a video, he was so disappointed in the casting of this reel that he packed it up after I think 15 or 20 minutes and went to using his Tsurunoe XF50. So that is the reason why I haven't purchased this reel for myself. Now, I had a small conversation with him about the reel, and he thinks that this thing will struggle with anything below 5 grams or 3/16 of an ounce. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and link the video of him casting this reel so you guys can see for yourself. But since this reel was sent to me, I'm going to have to find out for myself if this reel is any good and report back to Chris, who had this reel sent to me. So I'm gonna string it up with probably 4-pound mono, stick it on a bait finesse rod, and we're gonna see just how low this reel can throw on the water. And I'm probably gonna bring out the XF50 as well, just as a comparison, since in my opinion that's the benchmark budget bait finesse reel from China. So yeah, be on the lookout for that video. It's been raining like literally every day, and not, you know, just sprinklings of rain. It's been raining all day, every day for the last month or so. So I've not been able to get out and do any kind of on the water videos like I wanted to, but I think this Sunday might be the day, and we will find out what the Seaknight POTM is all about. All right, guys, thanks a lot.